Welcome back. It is panel time. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell, Eugene Scott, the national political reporter for the Washington Post, Matthew Continetti of the American Enterprise Institute, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri. All right, let me put up a few data points here on inflation for everybody. First, here's where the price increases year over year. Gas is up nearly 50%. We heard a lot over the last 6 months about the used car issue. That's over 25%. But here's the stuff like groceries, meat, poultry, fish, and eggs up nearly 12%, and the rent up over 11%. But let me also show you this map here because it may actually explain why there's a feeling that some are more in touch with this issue than others. The red here is where inflation is the highest. If you look at that red, it looks like a lot of red political states as well. Look at the two coasts. It's certainly there, but where it's bluer, the impact is a bit less. So, Leanne, when you hear this sort of discordant messages on inflation, I mean, you hear Pramila Jayapal, oh, people aren't experiencing it. Well, maybe they're sort of baked it in, but in some of the red areas, they're feeling it hard.
Yeah, that's right. That's why every single time I've spoken with Rick Scott, the head of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, he's been talking about inflation for months. And this is what Republicans are focusing on. Democrats, on the other hand, they're focused on passing the Biden agenda, which there's some concerns that it could increase inflation. Democrats say that it won't. They say that the Build Back Better plan will actually help inflation. They're hoping there's more money in people's pockets, that inflation is transitory and that it will go away. But there's months to see to these elections.
Eugene, we're all transitory. Depending on sort of, I feel like that excuse.
It's a very deep point.
It is. Well, but you got to be careful there. What feels temporary on a stat sheet is somebody's reality.
Yeah, it's a reminder that this is a big America, and you have to have messaging that targets where people are in different places. It's not a surprise, though, that Democrats want to lean heavily on the Build Back Better plan because many of its programs are popular, and so they feel like if they can move forward with that, the concerns many Americans may have with inflation, they're hoping will seem smaller compared to the victory the Democrats are hoping to get.
Claire, is this a political problem for the White House or a policy problem?
No, it's both.
Yeah.
Probably a big political problem. I mean, if we're talking about gas prices this time next year, if next summer, then it's even going to be harder in the midterms, and it's already going to be hard.
Right.
You know, job numbers are great. I mean, Biden's created more jobs in the first 10 months of his administration than Trump did in the first 2 years of his administration. And by the way, he didn't have COVID then.
Right.
So, the job creation's great, but if you've got a job, but you're paying $5 a gallon for gas, that's all you think about. So I think it is a big political problem. And I'll tell you, Eugene, the problem with the Build Back Better and the infrastructure is how quickly can they execute? How quickly can those things feel real as the price of butter? In the grocery store. And I don't know if they can execute quickly enough to make them real enough to matter next November.
You know, Matthew, if we actually wanted to deal with this issue, there's three. You can raise taxes, you can raise interest rates, you can flood the labor market, right? Those are some things that could deal with inflation. I guess Republicans in 22 don't have to come up with a solution, though, do they? They can just talk about it.
No, they don't. I mean, Joe Biden arrived in this town, Washington, D.C. in 1973, just as the great inflation was picking up speed,
right.
Sank 3 presidencies. Hurt Nixon, hurt Ford, hurt Carter. Inflation is a presidency ender. And the only way we know how to cure it, Chuck, is a deep and long recession.
Oh, that's really optimistic.
I'm the bearer of bad news today.
But that gets at the issue. There is not a policy answer, right? This is one of those. They got to hope they're right about the supply chain. They got to hope they're right about the labor market. And maybe they are, but we don't know.
And they have to hope that COVID goes away because they are blaming COVID in part on inflation and all of the problems. And that's why Democrats continue to be focused on the agenda. They are singularly focused on this, and they are pointing to the fact that inflation won't be an impact. Larry Summers, their favorite economist, who was big on inflation, saying that it is a problem, is now saying that their agenda, the Build Back Better plan, will not lead to inflation. And they are pointing to that and just trying to get things passed.
All right. So if inflation is the sort of the wet blanket of the economic story for the White House, this issue of party unity is turning into, I think, a problem on the Republican side. The bipartisan infrastructure bill has turned into this litmus test among the MAGA world. I want to put up the Republicans that have been threatened over their roads and bridges vote. Fred Upton, it's just polarized, toxic environment, worse than I've seen before. Don Bacon, they are being intentionally deceived by some folks in our party in Washington and some of the so-called conservative outlets. It's amazing people want to kill me over paving roads and clean water, said Andrew Garbarino of New York. I mean, feels like we've gone over the cliff.
It's a complete misreading, I think, of the situation. One, this bill is popular, right? And especially popular in the districts of Republicans who voted for it. Two, the bill basically collapsed whatever leverage progressives had over the Build Back Better
plan. So actually, if you actually care about the politics of it,
they were voting
for it.
They were holding the infrastructure bill hostage in order to get Manchin to go more over to the progressive side. Well, now that's gone. The progressives folded. So moreover, this is how many infrastructure weeks did we have during the Trump administration? Finally, we got it. And what does Trump do? He turns against it. And why? I think it's very important to realize he's trying to mold a Republican Party that is going to guarantee him a coronation in 2024. That's what this is about. He should support infrastructure, but more important is he wants an easy path to the nomination in 2024.
But this response isn't surprising. This is the logical conclusion of where we've been for the last 4 years. I spent Friday calling multiple offices of the Republicans who voted for the bill to see if they'll show up Monday at the signing ceremony, and most did not even return our calls because you don't want that photo op and to go against you when you're running in a primary against someone that Trump is backing.
Ironically, Claire, so far it appears Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski are the only two Republicans that are going to be there. Susan Collins, that was part of her campaign pledge, was to work with Democrats. She has to be there politically. And Lisa Murkowski may need Democrats to win re-election. So it actually makes political sense for them to be there.
I would hope some of the retiring members, the Rob Portmans, the Richard Burrs, the ones who voted for this bill, that they would show up. Frankly, it's probably better for Democrats that Trump captures the Republican Party in the long run. But for our country, this is really sad. And, I didn't come to Washington in 1973 like Joe Biden, but I can assure you when I got here in 2007, it wasn't like this. There were Democrats and Republicans that worked together and passed bills all the time.
But Claire, I also remember,
this is weird.
I also remember, though, back then we'd say, it used to be so much better.
Well,
every 10 years we do say
this is really bad.
And these Republicans think that somehow the Republicans who voted for infrastructure are helping Biden, but they're wrong. They hurt the Build Back Better.
But logic has. I banned logic during the Trump era because I think a lot of Trump supporters banned logic.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.